think we're ready to get. We have just about a minute to go until 6 o'clock hits, when we all turn into pumpkins or mice or whatever you want us to turn into. All right, I'm gonna get going. I wanted to, first of all, thumbs up if the other panelists can hear me. Can anybody hear me? Okay, awesome.
Can hear you.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for those of you joining us from TV land, as I like to call it. I guess that's pretty much everybody, since this is Zoom from 4 different locations, even across Broward County lines. I had to go get my dog from the vet, so here I am in Broward, but don't hold that against me either. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. My name is Tanya Bhatt, and on behalf of the entire board of directors of Miami Beach United, I'd like to welcome you to our forum to help explain the August ballot questions and the positions that MBU is taking and why we're taking those positions. Please note that we will be doing forums for the November ballot questions as well, and for the candidates to fill the late lamented Commissioner Mark Samuelin's seat, which will be an election in the same election in November. We'll be doing those obviously closer to the time. So today we're really focusing on the August questions. If you would like to receive our newsletters on these types of items and on items before the commission that get sent out each month, please visit our website at miamibeachunited.org and click on the newsletter sign up. That is free to everybody, and we welcome you to subscribe to get informed and stay engaged. If you value what we do in sort of parsing these issues and sharing information and keeping everybody informed, and would like to support us in doing it, please visit us at miamibeachunited.org at join, and memberships start as low as $25 a year. Not only do you get the rich satisfaction of helping us to advocate and make advocacy for residents possible, and to share that information and to educate people on how they can get involved on matters that are important to them. You also get invited to our members only events at very cool venues around the city. So I encourage you to join up one way or another, or both. Please also note that this is a nonpartisan discussion of nonpartisan issues. This is not going to descend into a bitter political discussion. The way it will work is that I'll review each ballot item, and then for items 4, 5, and 6, which are really the heavyweight issues for the August election, I will turn it over to one of the 3 experts on the panel to discuss each of those items in detail. Please hold any questions that you may have for the end of the presentation, at which time we will take questions for any of the items if there are any questions to be had. Without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. First off, we have Tim Carr of the West Avenue Neighborhood Association, not to be confused with Father Timothy Carr from All Souls Episcopalian Church. Tim is president of WAvNA and has been a West Ave resident for 9 years. Next up is Saul Gross, founding member and treasurer of Miami Beach United and 2-term Miami Beach commissioner. And last but not least, we have Ron Starkman, VP of Government Affairs for MBU and a SOFNA board member for the past 8 years, including previously as president and currently as secretary. I'd like to thank MBU Director Claire McCord for helping put this forum together, and to Ryan Barras, MBU member, for helping with the technical aspects of the Zoom webinar. Hopefully everybody watching this has received the Miami Beach United newsletter with information about how to vote and when to vote and where you can vote and all that kind of good information. If anybody needs that or is interested in seeing it and hasn't, you can visit our page on Facebook, which is Miami Beach United on Facebook, and you can see it there. You can also email us at info@miamibeachunited.org and we can send it your way. So let's start off with an easy question, which is ballot question number 1. Let me just, before I dive into the questions themselves, I just want to say that each question on the ballot is what's going to be visible on the screen here. I will only abuse the English language. I won't insult either French, Spanish or Creole, but I will show you all three languages. This is how it will look when you are voting on the ballot. And then I will also show you, and then I will talk in regular English about what the ballot question is actually asking. So for the first ballot question, hang on a second, I just need to minimize my screen here for a second. For the first ballot question, the question talks about the park that is part of the 5th and Alton development. It reads, April 2022, the city took ownership of a 3-acre public park generally located between Alton Road and West Ave from 6th Street to 8th Street, constructed by TCH 500 Alton LLC as part of a development agreement at no cost to the city. The new park includes a botanical garden, dog park, a play and fitness area, and other elements around a central lawn. Shall the new public park be named Canopy Park? Now, basically, this is the park that was promised to the residents when Russell Galbert built his 500 Alton project, and it has been in use for the last 2 months, maybe 3 months, and I think most people are pretty happy with it. This is specifically and exclusively about what the name of the item of the park is going to be. There was an opportunity for public input, and names were suggested. It was narrowed down to Canopy Park, which is what this question asks. MBU did not opine on this matter. We don't have a strong feeling one way or another, but this is specifically whether or not you would like to see this named Canopy Park. It doesn't give a process to suggest any other names for the park. It's purely Canopy Park, yes or no. So that is question 1. Ballot question 2. One of the city boards is the Board of Adjustment. It's probably the one that gets the least amount of attention from most of us regular residents, unlike the Design Review Board or Historic Preservation Board or the Planning Board. Over the last number of years, board seats have been given a little bit more attention. And so some of the things that have happened have been that there have been resident at large seats that have been added, and other qualifications have been added more stringently rather than just as a recommendation. This question reads, Cities Related Special Acts Article 1 establishes a Board of Adjustment, commonly known as the BOA, appointed by a city commission composed of 2 citizens at large and 5 persons, each representing one of these professions: law, architecture, engineering, real estate development, certified public accounting, financial consultation, general business. Article 1 thus permits, but does not require, appointment of an architect to the BOA. Shall Article 1 be amended for a limited purpose of requiring appointment of 1 member from the architecture profession? So this is, again, really just, and the language is a little bit weird because there's a word count limit for ballot questions, but basically they are saying that or asking your opinion, instead of suggesting that one of the professions to be a choice for the appointees is an architect, they are asking if you, the residents, feel that it is important enough to have an architect on the board that one of the positions must be filled by an architect. So that is the question on that. Again, MBU did not opine on this particular matter because it seemed just like an obvious and long overdue correction that should be made. So if that were a position, it would be, yes, we support this, but again, we did not officially opine on it. The third question is also it seems like kind of a no-brainer after the fact bit of cleaning up and housekeeping. The ballot question is about whether or not candidates running for office should submit 1 or more proof of residency documents upon filing their candidate papers to run for office. The question language reads, shall Charter Section 6.03 regarding qualifying for city elected office be amended to create an additional qualifying requirement that candidates submit 1 or more proof of residency documents upon which candidates rely to evidence their compliance with the charter's existing requirements that candidates reside in the city for at least 1 year prior to qualifying for office. That is a lot of language to say, basically, do people running for office need to prove that they are and have been residents of the city of Miami Beach for at least 1 year prior to registering to run for office for the city of Miami Beach? And you might think this is ridiculous. Why are we even doing this? But as it stands now, our laws do not require anybody to demonstrate that they are actually residents, full-time residents for the city of Miami Beach. In our last election cycle, we had two candidates who qualified to run who actually were not technically residents of Miami Beach. One was challenged by his opponent's campaign and was disqualified. The other one went on unopposed, but this is not something that should ever happen again. It seems like it's ridiculous that we got this far as a city without catching it, but here we are. So again, this is not something that should be particularly controversial. Miami Beach United obviously supports strengthening this existing charter language to require residency, proof of residency prior to running. Okay, those were the three easy ones. And now we'll turn to the less easy ones, and you won't have to listen to me ramble on quite so much. The next question is ballot question number 4. It is RPS 1 district, RPS 2 district, FAR incentive to convert remaining apartment hotel uses to residential use. Again, sounds very complicated. Basically, this is asking residents if they want to incentivize owners of buildings that are currently used for apartment hotels to convert them to purely residential use hotels. You can see the ballot language there in front of you. And instead of my reading it again, I will turn it over to Ron Starkman, who's going to handle this question in particular.
There we go, unmuted. So MBU usually opposes requests for FAR increases because they are usually at the initiative of a developer who wants to put up a bigger building in order to increase their profits, and residents usually end up on the short end of the stick with more density and congestion. What's different about this proposal is that it was originated by residents in the neighborhood through the South of Fifth Neighborhood Association. The reason is that apartment hotels have been a nuisance in the neighborhood, causing crime and congestion and noise. The neighborhood was successful in getting new zoning regulations put in place that prohibited apartment hotels from new apartment hotels from operating after August 18th, 2021. But those that were already operating or under construction were allowed to continue because zoning cannot be done retroactively. The problem with an apartment hotel is that basically what was going on here is that a property owner would buy an apartment building, and then they were allowed to convert it to a hotel as long as they kept just one unit as a residence. So this was very important that we stop this with all the problems with it, but we now are left with 7 apartment hotels in the neighborhood in RPS 1 and 2 that are existing properties operating as hotels or under construction to convert to an apartment hotel. So what this referendum item proposes is to provide an incentive to those 7 properties to convert back to pure residential use, not to a residential hotel, Tanya, but just to a pure resident apartment where short-term rentals would not be allowed. They'd have to covenant that they would be minimum 6-month rental. And the incentive would also include, though it's not required on the ballot for voter approval, an additional 10 to 20 feet of height. but the incentive is only 0.25 FAR increase, so it's very modest. But we're hopeful that at least some of these properties would be willing to convert back to residential use with this incentive, which is why MBU is recommending that you support this item and vote yes. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Before we go any further, we tossed around the term FAR or FAR, assuming that everybody knows exactly what it means. And I think probably most of you on this call have an idea, a pretty good idea of what it means. I know we've talked about it in various recent MBU newsletters, but I thought I might put Saul on the spot and ask him to give the group a very quick user-friendly explanation of FAR so that as we go through the remainder of the ballot questions and further ballot questions down the road in November, everybody has a really good understanding of exactly what it means and why everybody is so concerned about it all the time. Saul, if you don't mind being put on the spot, I'll hand it over to you.
No problem. The FAR is the floor area ratio. It's a ratio between the size of a piece of land and the number of square feet that you're allowed to build on a particular piece of land. So let's say that the land is 10,000 square feet. If you have an FAR of 1, you could build 10,000 feet times 1, which is 10,000. If the FAR was 1.5, you could build 15,000 by multiplying the 10,000 feet of land times the 1.5 development capability. FAR of 2 would be 20,000 feet that you could build. FAR of 3 would be 30,000. FAR of 4.5, which is proposed in North Beach for the Carillon Hotel site, instead of 10,000 feet, you could build 45,000 feet. So you can see if you change the 10,000 feet to 100,000 feet and multiply by 1 or 1.5 or 2, the higher the FAR gets, the amount of square footage that the developer can build increases quite substantially. If you have 1 million square feet and you have 4.5 FAR, you get 3.5 million extra feet of development rights. So this is the golden goose that really controls the size of development in the city of Miami Beach. And the charter specifically said that you cannot increase FAR by any means other than putting two pieces of private property together that are next to each other. And, that's a normal way that developers build, because they buy a few pieces of land that are right next to each other and they put a building on that. So you can spread your FAR over those contiguous lots, but you can't do it over lots that aren't right next to each other. So that's the simple explanation of what FAR is, what you can do with it.
Yeah, but it requires, FAR increases require voter approval, which is why you're seeing this on the ballot. That's not something that the commission can just approve on their own.
Correct.
Right. Not sure if I want to make sure everybody caught that. I think there was a technical difficulty at the beginning of Saul's explanation, but if anybody wants us to revisit that at the end, we can come back to that. But I think everyone's got a pretty good, I would hope everybody's got a pretty good handle on it. I just want to it's the site and the two unoccupied properties adjacent to it that are the the site that all was for. And also you might hear from somebody who is promoting an increased FAR. Yes, but it won't increase density. And what that means is that a developer footage to build into and build up, but it wouldn't necessarily make a new building or a property have more residents if that developer chose to make fewer but bigger and more expensive apartments rather than more and smaller apartments. So that density conversation plays into FAR as well, and it's kind of sometimes one is used as a little bit of a diversion for the other, but that's getting ahead of ourselves for now. Okay, that takes us through question 4. We will now go on to question 5. And speaking again of FR. This is the question pertaining to the Alton Road Gate area. Goes back a little bit to the 500 Alton project that Russell Galbert is in the process of developing, where the first ballot question asked you about the park, the name of the park. This is a new, different, but neighboring development project referred to as the Gateway area. And the desire is to increase the floor area ratio, the FAR, from 2.0 to 2.6. So going back to Saul's analogy, that is a multiplier, and not insignificant multiplier for what could be built. I will be turning this over. The one thing to keep in mind as you listen to all this is that it's also including an additional residential building that really hasn't been discussed very much. And that is a little bit of a concern. So Tim, take it away.
Thanks, Tanya. Again, you were breaking up a little bit. So hopefully during my discussion here, you'll hear the complete conversation. So again, referendum number 5 really talks about increased density to allow the developers to build a privately owned tower at 710, 720 Alton Road, which is the current site of the Community Health Center on the north side of the new park. And again, if the developers have agreed that and the referendum passes, they'll build a new and improved community health center across the street on Alton Road. Specifically, your vote will decide whether to approve a floor area ratio FAR increase from 2.0 to 2.6 in the area between 5th and 8th Streets from Alton Road to West Avenue. So let's talk a little bit about the details, because I know the ballot initiative is very, very brief. So if people were able to better understand that the items behind it, I think this will help everyone make a more informed decision. So what are the details in this ballot initiative? So let's talk about FAR, quality, height, traffic, impact studies, and also feedback from the community. In particular, if you look at the FAR, again, we're looking at a 0.6 FAR, basically translates to over 240,000 square feet of increased space. It's currently approved for about 38,000 square feet, or about a 6-story structure. But again, if approved and it gets the 240,000 square feet, that could be a building as tall as 15 to 20 feet. So again, let's talk a little bit about the quality. The existing health center is overcrowded and needs expansion, but the new proposed center will be the exact same size, if not slightly smaller, across the street. So again, WAvNA in particular, we advocate to help the new health center, but we want to make people aware that, again, we're not getting a bigger, better health center when it comes to square foot. Again, we talked about the height. You could go from the currently allowable 60 feet up to potentially 200 feet, which is out of scale for the neighborhood and the surrounding residents. Traffic, again, no real traffic study has been done to date on this. We still don't even know the traffic and density impact on the residents' quality of life at 5th and Alton with the 5-park tower. So again, that's in process. The mayor has already said that 5th and Alton is one of the most congested street corners in the city of Miami Beach. So again, there's a lot to be seen before we push for a potential other development in this area. And lastly is the ingress egress. For this type of development, if you're coming northbound on the overpass on Alton Road, there's no way you can make a left into this development, but basically would have to make 3 left turns around 8th Street and over to West Avenue to try to get into this development. So again, impact studies really need to be more aggressively done to give the best possible conclusion for the neighborhood. The Community Health Center, there is currently over $600,000 available to refurbish and upgrade the health center if it does not relocate. It passed a 40-year recertification process as recently as October 2020. And the county made over $638,000 in repairs from 2019 to 2020. So again, for transparency issues, you need to be aware of, we've been flooded with mailers. Just vote yes for referendum ballot number 5 to help for a new health center, but at what cost and what consequences? So please keep that in mind. So again, what is a yes vote? So if there's a yes vote, you'll allow the current health center to move across the street into a new facility with a library that's being asked to put on top of that by the county. In exchange, the developer will receive permission to build a nearby tower that exceeds current height and density limitations, allowing anywhere from, again, 150 to 250 feet tall. This, of course, will impact our entire corridor from 5th to 8th Street and potentially beyond. If a no vote, again, the current health center would stay at its current place. There would be no increase in FAR. And again, the county funds are still available to go towards upgrades for that current site and health center. So again, a lot of things to think about as everyone looks at this initiative. We encourage you to share your thoughts with your residents and neighbors on this process and get out and vote.
Tim, could you restate the possible height of the additional tower that is being proposed? I think you said it would be between 150 and 250 feet. And currently what is allowed is 60 feet. Is that correct?
Yeah, 60 feet or about 6 stories, or 150 to 200 feet, which again would be 15 to 20 stories.
So just for those of us who are trying to visualize what this would look like, at best, this would be more than doubling the height of what is allowed to be built there now. So if you've got a 6-story building there, doubling it would be 12 stories. And we're talking about 150 feet, which is clearly more than 12 stories. And it might be up to 250 feet. And this is a pretty significant part of the deal that is not being discussed in all of the glossy flyers that are papering our mailboxes in discussion about saving the clinic. And to be clear, nobody wants to have our neighbors having subpar healthcare. That's not the deciding factor here. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood what else is on the table that isn't getting the same amount of explanation that other parts of this are. Okay, thank you. And last but not least, this is ballot question 6. It pertains to the charter section 1.03C, which is something that Miami Beach United has been talking about and working on for quite some time, because we believe that this is a loophole that lawyers for developers have been exploiting for a number of years. It used to be once in a blue moon, and it is now sort of the de facto way of doing business. And we believe it has gotten out of hand, it's unchecked, and it's problematic. The question asks, it asks you to amend the charter to better protect the potential aggregation of FAR. Let me rephrase that, to better protect the opportunities that could lead to aggregated FAR. And I'm going to turn this over to Saul, who's been working on this for quite a number of years. And we are very happy to finally see it on the ballot. And we really, really encourage you to support our position on this. Saul?
Thank you, Tanya. I'm going to just read what the charter says on its face, because it seems very simple and obvious. It says the floor area ratio of any property or street end within the city of Miami Beach shall not be increased by zoning, transfer, or any other means from its current zone floor area ratio, unless it's first approved by a vote of the electors of the city of Miami Beach. This was a very hard fought issue, probably it's got to be 20 years ago. So for people who haven't been around for very long, it's kind of ancient history. But for those of us who lived through that period, the city would just take a piece of land and upzone it so that people who were living around it, who thought that maybe they could only have a 5-story building next to them, all of a sudden could have a much denser building next to them that could be 25, 30 stories. So they fought by ballot initiative to put on the charter that the only way that you could increase the FAR and the density of a piece of land was by having the voters first approve it. And this was the law of the land for probably 20, 25 years. All of a sudden, with Ocean Terrace, the city of Miami Beach, and the developer, after they put on the ballot the issue of whether FAR could be increased for the Ocean Terrace development, and the residents said, no, we don't support it. You didn't show us a project that we think warrants increasing the density of a very charming neighborhood on Ocean Terrace. So the voters said no, and the commission and the developer got together and they said, well, how are we going to get around what it is that the voters just voted no on? What we think we can do is pretend to vacate Ocean Terrace, the street, and we will deed a part of the street to the developer who owns the adjacent property. And so the public doesn't get angry with us. We'll take an easement back for the public so that people can still travel over Ocean Terrace. So there's no difference when you drive down the street. But on the other hand, they added 100,000 square feet to the size of the development that was permitted on Ocean Terrace. And if you want to visualize what 100,000 feet is, think of a 15-story hotel or office building where previously nothing could be built. So it's basically manufacturing additional density and development rights out of thin air with the pretense of pretending to vacate a public property. This caught on, as you can well imagine, because developers were thrilled with this idea. The city could pretend to vacate any street at all in the city. So they did it on 5th Street, 6th Street, adding 30,000 square feet to that project. They did it on 21st Street, where the Seagull was being converted to the Bulgari. And MBU is not opining on the merits of the project that's being built. The Bulgari, I think, is a terrific project. But what the MBU wants to see honored is the charter that requires voters to approve an increase in density, not the commission to approve it. And the commission and developers don't want that. A, it's a delay because they have to wait until the next election. B, it's expensive. So it's intentionally so that only projects that are meritorious would even think about putting it on the ballot and spending the money to try and convince voters that it's meritorious. And the commission has argued, well, we can be representatives of the people and we can make the deal for the people. But that's not what the charter says. The charter says that we've seen different commissions. Some commissions are terrific and some commissions not so great. And we don't want to put the power in the hands of the commissioners because developers have a way of wining and dining commissioners and convincing them that a public benefit that they're offering is sufficient to exchange for an increase in the density. But the charter and its initiative was very clear that that would only rest with the voters and not with the commission. So MBU has been fighting for 2.5, 3 years to get this question on the ballot to clarify that you cannot increase the FAR by vacating or selling or transferring public property that's adjacent to private property and thereby increasing the FAR on that property and increasing the density. This was tried with the Marina Park, which was, I'm sure many of you remember, we refer to it as Marina Towers, but in their marketing materials, the developers referred to it as Marina Park as if the 20-some-odd story building didn't really exist and was simply an adjunct to the park. They were vacating part of Washington Avenue, or pretending to, which would have resulted in an extra 90,000 square feet in that development. And the interesting thing is that this developer excellent developer again, and many thought the project was good, but it had to be approved by the voters to the minds of MBU and a simple interpretation of the reading of the charter. So they put 3 different ballot questions on, but they were petrified to put the actual question on the ballot whether they could increase the density of their project because they were pretending to vacate part of Washington Avenue. So these are the kinds of issues that are at play here. We were unable for a very long time to get 4 commissioners on the dais to support the charter amendment that MBU has been fighting to get in front of the voters to see if voters agree that for density increases that are beyond what's included in the code, that residents be the ones to decide and not the commissioners. So we finally, with a recent change of commission, and Commissioner Rosen Gonzalez got elected and Commissioner Minor got elected, and I see Commissioner Minor joins us today at this Zoom meeting, and he was courageous in bucking the developers. Commissioner Rosen Gonzalez was as well, and Commissioner Alex Fernandez made the motion, and the 4th vote, or the 3rd vote, was Commissioner Mark Samuelin. In one of his final votes as a commissioner before he became ill and passed away, he supported and was the 3rd, 4th vote. I mean, who knows which commissioner was which vote, but they're all need to be recognized as being courageous in supporting putting this on the ballot. So it was Commissioner Rosen Gonzalez, Commissioner Minor, Commissioner Fernandez, and Commissioner Samuelin were the 4 votes. So because of their efforts, this is on the ballot in August. It's a fairly straightforward question. We want you to vote yes on this question to say that the voters are the ones who should have the right to increase FAR or density for a development project. Thank you. Do we want to take questions, Tanya? Or
Yeah, so I was just unmuting myself. So, to reiterate Saul's point, MBU is not automatically against development projects. We're in favor of development that is thoughtful and preserves character of place and is proportionate and is supported by the neighborhood. This is specifically about the sort of end run that has been happening for the last several years to circumnavigate the mechanism in the charter that gives the power to make these decisions to the voters as it was intended by those who drafted the charter. So, for instance, the Wilsonian had an FAR increase that they put up to voters a couple of years ago, and people looked at the project and said, you know what, this is a great project and we support the FAR increase, and so be it. So we're really talking about the mechanism, not is it pro or anti-development? It's the mechanism. And as Saul said, some years you have great commissions and some years you have less great commissions. And hopefully what will stay steady is the voters in Miami Beach who want to preserve what makes this place so special, which is, the fact that it's not a concrete canyon, one next to another. So I'm going to open it up for questions.
Tanya, I just want to say one more thing, because I forgot to mention. There was one other plan that hopefully has died in incubation that the commissioners Richardson and Ariola and Mayor Gelber were trying to hold in their pockets as a way of increasing development. If you can believe this, they were planning to pretend to vacate Ocean Drive with the intention of giving the FAR from the street of Ocean Drive to the adjacent hotels so that the density of those hotels could be increased without voter approval. The most iconic street in the city of Miami Beach, and they would just increase the density without any resident approval. And when this ballot question when this initiative that MBU proposed got on the ballot, the commissioners realized that they weren't going to be able to vote to pretend to vacate Ocean Drive to increase density of the Art Deco hotels that were adjacent. So for a minute, Commissioner Richardson put on the Land Use Committee last month a proposal to increase the FAR on Ocean Drive from, I think it's 1.5 right now, or maybe it's 2, I'm not 100% sure, to 4.5. So basically unlimited height, double the density, and that was the plan. And that was one of the reasons when we got a whiff of that, that we realized that we just had to stop this and get this on the ballot. And again, 4 fearless commissioners did. So with that, Tanya, if you want to open it up to questions.
Well, and one of the other interesting little shenanigans that we saw last month was an attempt to repeal this vote of getting this item onto the August ballot and replace it with a similar but not quite the same charter amendment question that basically would not accomplish the same protections of making FAR something that voters had to vote on when you're aggregating properties. But that was
public and private properties.
Public and private properties, but that was, thankfully that was pulled. That would have been a real mess. But again, I think people were recognizing how important this is. They'd been successful in keeping it off the ballot for a number of years, but once they realized that it was on, they were trying everything they could to weaken it, which just shows you how important it is that we all vote yes and make this part of our charter. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to questions. We did have one question from somebody named Miriam, and I asked for a little bit of clarification, but I don't see necessarily that we've received it. The question was, how many FAR increases has this development received since its inception? But it's unclear which development Miriam was referring to. The 2 developments that we talked about as having the biggest issue were, was the project that is proposed with the community health center and the library on it. I'm not sure if that's what Miriam meant, or if she was referring to the original 500 Alton project, which I know got at least one additional bump of FAR when the developer appealed 40 years worth of land use definitions to the Board of Adjustments and got some additional FAR that way. But until we get further clarification on that question, we're going to have to let that one go for now. But if anybody else has any questions, please type it into the chat, and we will take them as they pop in. Okay, so we have a couple more. Okay, we have one question about question number 5. What happens with the current facility if it doesn't pass? Is there some other plan instead to improve it?
So there is currently $600,000 available to upgrade the facility from county money at this time. So that is definitely on the table for them. Okay, and there have been requests to reiterate our vote positions, and I do see that Miriam did get back to us referring to question number 5. Tim, do you know how many FAR increases this particular project has received, the one in question 5? So this is the first one for this ballot initiative. So going from 2.0 to 2.6. So this is the first request for that.
Okay. So there are a number of requests to reiterate the MBU positions. So I'll just go through those super quickly, and I apologize. I didn't realize that the technical glitch was on my end. I guess the internet quality is not so good in Broward as it is in Miami-Dade, but we can fix that, or we have fixed that. Okay, so for ballot question number 1, the naming of the park between Alton and West from 6th to 8th Street as Canopy Park, MBU did not take a position on that. The question number 2, and again, if you want to see this all written out, you can visit our Facebook page and click on the link there to see our one of our most recent newsletters, or you can also go to our website at Miami Beach United, and after you're done signing up for the newsletter and joining as a member, you can also go to our archived newsletters and see our positions there. Ballot question number 2 is about requiring that the architecture membership category for the Board of Adjustment goes from being something that is permitted and suggested to a required position. And while MBU did not opine on this item officially, it seems like it's an obvious and long overdue correction of something that should have been done a while ago. So we would say yes to this as well. Ballot question number 3, which is talking about requiring proof of residency for anybody entering into a race to be a candidate for commission or mayor, for commissioner or for mayor. We support this clearly. Again, this seems like it's such a no-brainer. It's kind of shocking that it hadn't been caught before. Question number 4 was about the using FAR incentive to convert the remaining apartment hotel uses to residential only use in a particular neighborhood south of 5th. And Miami Beach United supports this. We do have a little bit of reservation about setting precedent about additional FAR as incentive to do the right thing, but in this case, it is definitely supported by the neighborhood, and so we support this ballot initiative.
It's proposed by the neighborhood.
What's that?
It's proposed by the neighborhood.
Right. Ballot question number 5, the Alton Road Gateway area. This is the one that most of the questions have been about. This is the one where we've seen a lot of flyers talking about the benefits of the improved community health center. And again, MBU definitely wants to see an improved community health facility for our neighbors. That's not the issue. But what isn't being discussed is the fact that in addition to that public benefit and a public library coming into that part of South Beach, this would also give the developer the right to build a residential tower that could be anywhere from 150 to 250 feet, where currently there's only a 6-story building. And that just has not gotten any attention, has not been discussed, and is a pretty draconian change for that part of the neighborhood, which is already very congested and which already has an enormous development being built as we speak at 500 Alton. And we don't know yet what the traffic impacts will be in real life when that comes online. And then last but not least is this issue of the charter amendment to close the loophole that developers have been able to exploit in order to aggregate properties by sort of having the city vacate public rights of way and then having the developer create an easement back to the city, so that for practical purposes, it doesn't change how residents might be able to use the land, but it does enable developers to get a significant additional amount of FAR without having to put it to the voters. And Saul talked about a number of examples in recent years where that was the case. And we also mentioned the fact that once commissioners realized how significant a change this could be in terms of the way they granted development rights, they were trying pretty hard to keep this off the ballot. But it is here, and it is arguably the most important thing you will vote on in August. And we definitely encourage you to support this change.
Tanya, this is Tim. Just a quick clarification for ballot number 5.
Yeah.
Again, the FAR increase, that accumulation is from 5th to 8th Street. And so that would equate to potentially 150 to 200 square feet, not 250 feet. So 150 to 200 feet. You're
Do
welcome.
we
I
want
think, I
to,
think Tanya was talking about architectural projections that aren't necessarily counted.
do we want to show I think somebody had some images that we could put
Yeah,
up to show.
Yeah, there's two
What look like-
photos. We could show what the current health center looks like, and where it would be moving to.
The building on the beach?
That looks
No,
pretty low density to me.
yes. That's not the photo.
We're working on it. Hang on a sec.
All right, let's take another question. While
Okay, so there are a lot of questions about the ballot question number 5, and none of us in the city have answers for this yet. And I will encourage anybody on the panel to jump in, but the health clinic in question is owned by the county, and it has been not kept up to par the way it should be. And I'll actually let Saul talk about it a little bit, because I know that he just spoke at some length with somebody involved with the county and the health clinic, and maybe he can address it a little bit. So right now, the only solution that's being proposed to improve the clinic is the one being put forth by the developer. There have been questions raised by neighbors in the community suggesting that the current plan for the proposed improved clinic don't actually go far enough in providing what residents need. I would imagine that there would be answers to those questions. We just don't have them at this time, unfortunately. That's the problem of trying to rush things onto a ballot without all of the T's crossed and I's dotted. We don't know how tall the residential tower would be. We don't know what additional options could be for the health clinic. We don't know if it's going to address all the needs that are currently unmet or just upgrade what's currently there. Again, this is why we're not so keen on rushing so many things onto a ballot before all the answers are provided. But let me turn it over to Saul to speak a little bit more about that, and then Tim will come back to you to show those images.
I mean, I hesitate to train all the focus on the community health center, because the community health center is being used as a Trojan horse to try and get people to support a density increase and a very dramatic height increase. Suffice it to say that if the health center is a big issue to you, the size of the health center when it's relocated is not going to be significantly different than it is now. Different accounts, will tell you it's going to be smaller or bigger. The community health center will lose their first floor access. They won't have any services on the first floor. And for some reason, and maybe Ron can explain this because I don't understand it, the library will take up about 5,600 square feet of the ground floor. I thought that we have a library in South Point already. Is that closing, Ron? Do you know?
No, there's a library currently at First and Alton.
Yeah, so
So,
why
no,
all of a
this is
sudden
just-
we need
well,
another
this-
library on 6th Street, that the
Yeah, 5
community health
blocks.
center can't have a walk-in facility, and that they're scrimping for space when, everyone's pretending like they're giving them this fantastically improved facility when they're not getting any additional space. They have no ground floor space. And, it's a Trojan horse to.
Now you
increase
can
the
see
size of
actually on the
ballot.
screen now, the current health center's location on the north side of the park on Alton Road. And what it would do is currently half that facility is closed and not in use. So even if you take half of the current facility that's in use, you would move it over to the right where the other circle is, next door to the Baptist facility. So again, like you said, it's a more compact site. And again, no parking available either there.
No Alton Road access either. And the reason it's being moved is not because they want to make a beautiful health center. The reason it's being moved is because they want to build a big building on Alton Road.
And you can see the other buildings currently around it. Baptist is 5 stories. Not in the picture to the left is the Federation Tower, which is an older senior building, which is 11 stories. But again, everything else on Alton Road and what it's approved for is currently 6 stories.
Okay.
And then there's one other picture that shows the potential rendering. And again, when I talk to any of the commissioners, none of them have seen any renderings. So what the proposals and all the flyers that you're seeing is basically to support a new health center, but they themselves are not privy to any of the details, such as this rendering to the right or the potential impact to the neighborhood. And the picture to the left is the project site. So it's currently would be the community health center, and there's an old abandoned tire replacement center to the right. And there's also the parking lot potentially right at the corner of 8th and West Avenue that the Federation Tower currently uses as well.
I mean, if past is prologue, you can assume that if the height is increased on Alton Road from 5th to 7th Street, that it won't be long before that same height increase takes effect for the balance of Alton Road, and then it'll move over to Washington Avenue, then it'll go all the way to Sunset Harbor. And this is the way the game is played. They get their foot in the door, and it happens in one neighborhood, and then all of a sudden it happens in every neighborhood. In fact, that's what led to 225-foot high buildings proposed for 71st Street.
Yeah, we call it the tip of the spear issues, where if you let it happen in one place, it'll happen all over the city.
I mean, the other thing you can be sure is if they're not showing you renderings of what they're proposing to be built, you know that it's that you're not going to like it. Because if you were, they'd be trumpeting their beautiful renderings. But when they're not doing that, they're basically saying this is going to be out of scale with what's built in the adjacent area. But we don't want to show that to you because we want you to focus on the community health center.
Somebody asked a question about whether or not there are other 15 to 20-story buildings on that side of Alton Road. Off the top of my head, I don't believe so, but maybe somebody who lives down in that neck of the woods could answer that.
There are none.
Yeah.
Again, that area is basically the current height limit is 60 feet going up Alton Road. So any new development that you're seeing, that's basically what they're trying to build to. You know, the Baptist Health Center is an example of that. And there's another new office building on the same side of the road, another block up, office tower, same thing.
You know, there are a lot of good questions about what happens if this gets voted down, what happens to the community health center, who's responsible for it. These are all excellent questions. And unfortunately, our commission doesn't have answers, and our county commissioners don't have answers. They're looking to this particular developer to come in and save the day with what some people feel is an insufficient health center. You know, the rendering or the illustration of the neighborhood that Tim put up a moment ago, where you see the footprint of the existing health center. I mean, the best of all worlds would be to make that entire facility functional again, as opposed to having just half of it be usable, and you know, potentially rethinking what gets done. We don't have those answers. As Saul mentioned, and as Tim mentioned, the commissioners haven't even seen the renderings of the proposed tower there. And I come back to this issue of, you know, what could potentially be a good idea but isn't in its current form, is being rushed onto the ballot without all the answers. You know, it's not that this couldn't be a workable project, but it's not in the way that it is currently conceived, is our position. So at this time, based on what has been made publicly available, MBU does not support the ballot initiative for question 5. We don't support it. It doesn't mean that we want the community health center to languish. In fact, we want somebody to come forward with a better proposal to do a better job for the community health center. And when they do that, we don't want them to sneak in a residential building that's going to be at least more than double what's currently allowed there without even discussing that.
Probably triple. But I mean,
Yeah,
the
I mean,
normal-
probably triple, given the folks involved. And, not for nothing, this hasn't been raised, but this proposal for this particular development is very close to the 500 Alton development. And it would seem, you talk to folks who know a lot about this, and it seems like this will also facilitate entrance to the 500 Alton project. And so, given that it's the same developer, we have to wonder what's behind the rush, as opposed to making this a more well thought out project that is a better community win, rather than a little bit of a cherry on top of the developer's cake. So I want to turn to a different question that somebody asked about explaining what. There are two questions asking for explanations. One is talking about what the Board of Adjustment actually does. And if maybe Saul, you could talk about that a little bit. And then also if you could revisit the vacation process as it relates to FAR, the fact that the commission can currently vacate a street or right of way as it stands now, which is why we're pushing so hard for ballot question number 6, why we support it and urge you to as well.
Yeah, I mean, the zoning board of adjustment basically deals with variances, generally small ones in relation to setbacks. Small amount of height used to be unlimited, but was restricted to only up to 3 feet about 10 or 15 years ago. Parking spaces, off-site loading zones and things like that. I mean, super technical issues in general that relate to code requirements that go along with building buildings. It's really the kind of stuff that often puts people to sleep. Some people have argued for giving staff the power to approve very small variances so that developers don't get hung up with having to go to the zoning board of adjustment. And indeed, some of the powers that used to be allocated to the zoning board of adjustment have been reallocated elsewhere. So the zoning board used to be the power board before the design review board was created and before the historic preservation board were created and before the planning board had more power. But at this time, the zoning board is, it's very technical in the compliance issues related to the code and making sure that the setbacks and the sizes of the parking spaces and the size of the loading zones and all of those things comply with the code and don't unduly burden the surrounding area.
I want to just jump in before you answer the next question, though. When the 500 Alton project was approved, that developer went to the zoning board and asked for a redefinition of a number of terms that undid 40 years of precedent in urban planning to increase the allowable height, if I'm not mistaken, for that project. Ron, you might remember those details better than I do. But so while it is extremely technical, not all of the decisions taken by the Board of Adjustments have small impact pertaining only to one project or another. Because of what was passed on behalf of this particular developer, other projects that were already on the drawing board and underway asked to be granted the same terms that were being used now going forward, even though they've been approved using the older version. So Ron, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
You're muted, Ron.
Which project specifically, Tanya, was the one that went before?
The 500 Alton project, after it got approved, went to the Board of Adjustments to redefine.
Yeah, so they could get even additional, I think, FAR.
Right.
I mean, it was somewhat of a technicality. I don't remember exactly what it was. It wasn't in the scope of that project, which is hundreds of thousands of square feet. It wasn't that significant, but I I mean, the other comment I would make on that project that wasn't brought up before was that one of the techniques that was used to allow for a building of that scale on that Fifth and Alton site was that the city vacated 6th Street, basically sold 6th Street to the developer and then got an easement back. And that allowed them to take the FAR from the 707th Street block and the 8th Street block and shift it all over to the 500 block, because then now they were, in a sense, connected. They weren't separated by a street anymore since the developer owned the street.
And that brings us back to why
Yeah.
we urge you to support question number 6.
Right,
To
and
include
that gets
developers.
to Ed Tunielius's question. He's asking who gets the right of way if it's vacated, and what rights is MBU opposed to the vacation or just to the aggregation of FAR? So Ron just gave the perfect explanation for why MBU is concerned about aggregating public and private land, even if the FAR is not being increased, because the current code in Miami Beach, except in very rare circumstances, does not allow transfer of development rights from one parcel to another non-contiguous parcel. So what the city has started to do, since they realize that the window is closing on this pretending to vacate streets to increase the density, so now the game is to pretend to vacate an alley or a street and then allow a transfer of the development rights across the alley, which essentially means you're reducing the FAR on the transfer property and you're increasing the FAR on the receiving property. So it is a transfer of FAR. It does exceed the allowable FAR under the current code, and it's against the code. If you want to have a scheme for transferring development rights, which Miami Beach has never had, and many other municipalities do have it, but Miami Beach hasn't, then propose a rule that makes it legal, that everybody has a chance to look at. In other words, MBU is really trying to avoid backroom deals where developers benefit by getting additional FAR, by pretending to vacate roads, or pretending to vacate in order to transfer development rights from one property to a non-adjacent property. Let's get everything out in the sunlight. Let's have charrettes. Let's understand what's proposed for these projects. Show us models of what it's going to look like. Miami Beach voters are intelligent. If you want to do that in a community process, which has been done many times before, South Point was essentially created in a charrette process. South Point Drive had charrettes about it. Even Thomas Kramer, for God's sakes, had charrettes about what was possible in South Point. Miami Beach voters want to be included in the process. They want to be educated. They want to see what's going on, and then they'll make their own informed decision. When they're not asked to participate, when they're excluded from the process, when they're not shown renderings, when there's no massing studies, when there's no charrettes, when there's no community involvement, they know when they're being fucked. I'm sorry, they just do. And that's what's happening here. So we're saying there are a lot of good developments. Show us what they are beforehand, not keep it behind your back, and then all of a sudden show it after you get approval from the commission. That's not the way it works. And that's not good government in the city of Miami Beach.
I will add to that. First of all, I'm thrilled that I was not the one to swear in this Zoom, because it's usually me. So thank you, Saul, for taking that hit for the team. For those of you who heard me speak publicly, you may have heard me talk about the Venn diagram, but it builds on what Saul has talked about, which is that if you get together and take the folks on opposing views of an issue and really share what is being proposed and what they need and what they want, and mix that all together and get as many people as you can into the overlapping part of the two circles, that's what yields the best result. And that's that kind of engagement, that community engagement that we at MBU strive for. And that's what Residents' Right to Know is all about, to make sure that communities and neighbors are informed about things that are happening in their backyard so they can become involved. That's when things that somebody who doesn't live there every day might not have thought about gets brought to the conversation. And, wouldn't it be great if, or be careful this doesn't happen. And that then will yield a better result. But to Saul's point, this doing it, kind of under cover of darkness without letting everybody into the conversation is not good for anybody. And that's really what we're trying to minimize here, to make most of that go away, or as much of that go away as we can with our limited power. There is one more question. I
People
see
are
somebody
asking what
asked.
MBU's position is on ballot question 5, Tanya. Can you
Yeah, so
reiterate
I had gone through the positions again. Ballot question 5, we definitely do not support as it currently stands. It doesn't mean that if it comes back in a different way with a better set of circumstances where the community is engaged and there's a really significantly improved community health center, and we know who's going to be paying for it and its upkeep and all that kind of good stuff that gets discussed with the community, that it couldn't be something that is revisited next year or whenever it may be. Let's
But at
see.
the moment, MBU's recommendation is to vote no on question 5.
That's right. As I mentioned, MBU does not support number 5.
Someone asked, is the city attorney responsible for writing ballot questions?
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, the answer to that is somewhat. The city attorney has to approve it as to form. There's a limitation on the number of words that can be in the ballot question. It's a very specific science. In our case, MBU had one version of the ballot question. The city attorney rewrote it at the last minute, which we were a little concerned about, but it turned out to be fine. In fact, it actually protected against transfers of development rights in ways that we didn't foresee at the time that we wrote it, because we were focused strictly on increasing FAR on the aggregated property, but not transfers. So yes, the city attorney is integrally involved in the approving the ballot question. They don't necessarily write it, but it has to pass legal muster before it can go on the ballot.
Yeah, it's written, in effect, it's written by the sponsoring commissioner first. And then that's what is read into the record for the rest of the commissioners to vote to approve to put it on the ballot. And then the city attorney fine tunes it to make sure it stays within the 75 word limit, the limit, and that it's, it's legally clear.
Yeah, actually MBU wrote its own ballot question in consultation with former city attorney Gary Held, former city attorney Jose Smith, and former ballot referendum master Mark Needle. So 3.
Right, but then Commissioner Rosen Gonzalez is the one who brought it forward.
She sponsored it.
Sponsored it, which, she just took our language, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it requires a commissioner to sponsor. And
but I will say that until MBU wrote its own ballot language, it didn't go anywhere. You really have to have something concrete to present to commissioners that they can look at and discuss and debate and send to the attorney and whatever. So from a resident activist group point of view, you're better off engaging with community-minded attorneys and writing your own ballot question to start off with. So at least it'll be framed in the way that you want to present it.
There was one last question. Ron, you might want to answer this about referendum number 4. Do we believe that FAR increase would be adequate to incentivize current property owners to convert to residential uses?
Well, it's both the 0.25, which is relatively modest, a few more units perhaps on these, because these are all low scale, smaller buildings. As well as a 10 to 20 foot height increase, depending on how on the specific lot size. And the short answer is maybe a couple of them. There are a couple that are currently under construction, 3 of them to be exact, that, you know, could possibly change their plan. Those that are already, you know, under completed and operating, probably less so, but and also it's, I think, important to note, I forgot to say this, that there is a sunset provision in there. I think it's 2 to 3 years, that, so in other words, if a property owner wants to take advantage of this, they can't just wait forever, they have to move on it. So, but regardless, even if one property was to do this, it would still be appreciated by the residents that live near it.
Okay.
All right, so unless there are any more questions, I think that'll do it for us. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. You can follow up with us by emailing info@miamibeachunited.org, and one of us will get back to you. We will have this recording posted to our website as soon as we're able to, and I think, I wasn't able to check, but I think there was also a link to our Facebook page. So in theory, you can go back and rewatch your favorite parts of this evening. Thank you for your attention. Thank you to my fellow panelists for your insights, and to Ryan for making this all work. And we'll see you again in probably September or October, if not before, to do this.
Yeah, we're going to have, our next event would probably be the candidates forum, right?
Potentially, but we'll check your email. We'll be sending out save the dates for everything. We will be putting together another social event as well. So like I said, if you are not already receiving our MBU newsletters, I encourage you to sign up. They're for free. And we do not sell your email information to anybody, or even share it when they ask nicely. So your email is safe with us. And on that note, thank you all very much and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Right.